Great. Hello. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Welcome, and happy World Health Day. This was, I think, a very appropriate film to watch and consider on Health Day, World Health Day, especially as we reflect on how many intersex people are struggling to get affirming and competent access to healthcare. Um, we are really excited to have both Flora and Jim here today with me to talk about the film. Flora from the production side and Jim as the star and the main subject of his own story. Um, and before we dive into that, I'll just briefly introduce myself. My name's Kimberley Zieselman. I'm an intersex woman and intersex human rights defender. I was officially a consulting producer on this project, which was just a pleasure to work with the team, the production team, and of course with Jim, whom I've known for many years. Um, I think, the issues around just medical care, medical ethics, and patient advocacy all really come to the surface in this film in a way that hopefully touches hearts and ultimately will perhaps change some minds. I know, at least for me personally, as an activist, that is one of the driving forces for me to be involved in this film is to help create a storytelling mechanism that changes hearts and minds and improves the world for intersex people and their families ultimately. Um, I think many of you here today are probably fairly well versed in intersex, but since not everyone is, I always like to share a definition. The definition is an umbrella term that describes somebody born with one or more physical sex characteristics that don't match up with typical notions of either a male or female body. We represent up to 2% of the population, and it seems like we're super rare, but we're not. We're just often invisible due to the erasure that society has put upon us, either as literal medical attempts to medically erase us and our intersex traits, or to not talk about us and not include us in relevant conversations about health equity and many other issues. Um, some of you may be wondering what the state of the law is around this. I suspect some of you are feeling pretty outraged after seeing this film, as you should be. And unfortunately, in most parts of the world, these types of surgeries and other harmful medical practices are still very much legal and very much happening around the globe. Um, in Europe specifically, we do have a handful of countries that have passed different types of legislation attempting to ban these surgeries on children until they're a certain age and can meaningfully participate in the decision. But those countries are few and far between. And as I understand it from my work doing global activism on this issue, even in those countries where these laws have been passed, they're not being well implemented. So the struggle remains real at a legal and policy level as well. Um, but today we're really here to talk about the human level and the how this film got made. So I'd love to just dive in. I will be asking our panelists a couple of specific questions, but then we are also open to participants putting their questions in the chat box. You should all have access to the chat box. I don't believe you're going to be able to unmute and speak, so we prefer that you chat your questions, and I will keep an eye on that now, later, whenever you think of a question. And I will be sure to turn to the questions in the chat at the end. So, without further ado, Flora, I'd like to start with you, if you don't mind. Authentic intersex stories are still really rare, sadly, in film as well as other types of media. But can you tell us how this film came to be and how it was for you as an endosex person, that's a non-intersex person, and as a producer helping to bring Jim's story to life?
Yeah, of course. So I was one of the producers on this film. and I joined the project in 2024. And by that time, Grace Hughes Hallett, the director who originated this film and developed it, and James Rogan, the other producer on the project, had already been working for, gosh, at least a year, maybe even 18 months to get this film commissioned, to get it greenlit, to get it developed, to find Jim, our main protagonist, to tell this story. And Grace originated it because Grace is a great director, and she is also perhaps best known until this point for her producing work. She was one of the producers on the documentary film Three Identical Strangers, which I'm sure lots of people here have heard about and hopefully watched. And her brother is a urologist, and she remembers receiving a phone call from him from a conference that he was at, where the conference attendants were talking about the David Reimer story. And he rang her up and he said, "Look, Grace, you're interested in interesting stories. I've got this amazing one for you. Did you have any idea that this had happened and that it has an effect on people today?" And she was just instantly interested in this and started to develop the story, but in a more modern and relevant way. David has long since passed. His family has long since kind of moved on. And his story, although it has been told before, had never really been told in this way, out with not his own experience, but the experience of other people that were affected by his story. So she spent kind of a year and a half developing that with Film 4 and Channel 4 and James Rogan. And then I came on board. And Jim and I had our first conversation in January 2024, which was 2 years ago. It's insane. It's a really mad amount of
That's
time.
yeah.
Yeah, the long time. So at that point, they'd obviously got it commissioned and greenlit, and my role from that point on was to really collaborate with Grace and with James to make this into a viable film. To make sure that Jim's story was put front and foremost, and work really closely. And I hope that Jim would agree. We did hopefully work quite closely with him to make sure that this could be as authentically his story as possible. You mentioned, Kimberley, about an authentic intersex story. That's not really how we approach this film. The only authenticity we can really guarantee is when we are working with our contributors really closely and making sure it's authentic to them. And I know from millions of conversations with Jim and kind of learning about this whole issue as I went along that Jim's story is not, there is no typical intersex story, and Jim and we were really at pains to make sure that we were just authentic to him and his experience, and not try and hold this up as the experience of people born with intersex traits. Um, I think one of the biggest challenges for us all was weaving kind of David Reimer's story into this as well. I mean, we didn't have him as a participant in the way that we had Jim. Grace worked quite closely with his family to begin with to get their blessing and make sure they knew that we were making this film, and we kind of stayed in contact with them throughout production. And David's story is so integral to Jim's story and to those born with intersex traits as well. But weaving that in was a real challenge. And I think we initially thought it was going to be a much bigger part of the film than it ended up being. But when Jim sat down in that interview chair and gave us 2 incredible days of intense, I don't know what the word would be for that, Jim, but interview. It doesn't seem to do it justice. We knew that there was so much there to make this film with. Um, yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Flora. So Jim, you were so truly wonderful in this film, and I know I keep saying that to you, and you're probably sick of it, but you made it look really easy from my perspective. You made it look, I mean, it was obvious there was emotion constantly, but you were so, I don't know, brave and direct in your presence and vulnerability. Can you share how it was? I mean, for you, just really, how was it making this film? Because I know a lot of us as intersex people, some are out, some aren't out. There's a desire to share our stories, but there's also such a large amount of emotional labor that goes into that it's not as common. Why were you able to do this now?
Well, thanks, Kim. And thanks to everybody who watched the film today. It means a great deal. I had sort of semi-retired from activism around 2017 when I had seen I mean, was it 2017 or 2018? Whenever Three Identical Strangers came out, and I just went to the theater and saw that film, and I thought, I thought that the filmmakers really about that film got something about the intersex experience, not actually the intersex experience, but when it comes to manipulation of families and manipulation of individuals and withholding information, all that stuff, lots of parallel themes. I thought, if these folks ever called, I would, I would talk to them. I don't know if, and it turns out that's exactly what happened. A few years later, Grace reached out to me, and we started a conversation. And I distinctly remember thinking that. And she was the producer of Three Identical Strangers. And I thought, I just need to move forward with this. And just, I was way too curious at the serendipity of it to not move forward. But it was, we spoke, she reached out to me in 2021 and we spoke back and forth for probably a little over a year. We talk, I think once every 3 months or a couple of months.
Mhm.
And and the more we talked, the more I realized the amount of privilege I live with every day. You know, um, I can walk to the corner store and buy a soda and talk to the shopkeeper about, the local baseball team that's terrible, and then walk out and he'll forget me and I'll go back home. And a lot of folks, a lot of people just in general do not have that ease and that privilege, but I have a lot. The color of my skin, the fact that I'm middle class, the fact that I was lucky enough to be, receive an education as a young person. And I thought, the longer the conversations went on with Grace, the more I thought, I think I'm obliged to do this. I think I think I have one more big shout to give. And not with the expectation that anything would change in this lifetime for intersex kids, and not that anything would change, for kids who were born yesterday. But I just thought, you know what? I could just see this, if I could see this as one more rung on the ladder, so the people behind me can continue to climb, continue to gain visibility. If they think 90% of this film sucks, but 10% of it's great and they want to cut it and use it in their education, great, good. I just felt like it, I felt like I was obliged and I felt like I had it in me. But right, like I said, it's 2021 and now we're into 2026. The film had its world premiere a year ago this month at South by Southwest. And it's been a long 5 years. And I'll just be, um, for any activists that are on the call, self-care is real, burnout is real, and please
Yeah.
do care for yourself. Um, so you can, one day get to have white hair and gray hair like me and be like, I think I did. I think I'm good. I think I'm good. You guys call me if you need anything, you know. Um,
Well,
uh, yeah.
yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for doing it. It's my hope that this film will get seen by many, many, many people. Um, so just to follow up, Jim, though, we in the film, one of the things that struck me the most, there were many things, but as an intersex person myself, who had also experienced some non-consensual surgeries, uh, it was the moment you confronted your surgeon. You had that rare opportunity to do that. I think there's some of us, in our community who talk about sort of dreaming of that. Um, and I would just love to explore a little bit more about like how was that for you? Um, and how did you feel about it during that experience? And then how do you feel about it now, reflecting back since it was filmed a bit ago?
It's the part of the film that stays with me. And frankly, sometimes keeps me up at night. I You'll notice, for the folks that just saw this, like, or maybe you wouldn't. It took me seeing the film, I think a third time to see that the filmmaker that Grace and Flora chose to put Heidi Walcott's segment from Hermaphrodites Speak about, you know, I would like to, use a dull, rusty blade and start hacking off doctors' genitals and say, "There, you son of a bitch, how do you like it now?" And Kim can back me up on this, that, and a lot of intersex activists will back me up on this, is that most intersex activists have felt either like this for years or they have had stretches in their lives where they have felt that way, that visceral anger and like, fantasy for revenge, and that, given the opportunity, I would empty all of my rage at this person who had such a hand in uh, crafting my daily life, my waking moment, every waking moment. And I thought it's so well known, it's so understood that I thought if it's a mistake, let it be a mistake. But I wanted to show people something different. I was like,
Yeah.
Dr. Richard Carter, Richard Carter is not interested in my outrage. Richard Carter doesn't care what it was like for me to negotiate anything. Because Richard Carter, much like many pediatric urologists around the world, see what they have done as a service, as a kindness, as a bit of grace, as mercy. One time, Beau Laurent, who is in the film, Beau told me a story about a doctor who said either to her or to someone that she knew that if I could only put, photos of children's genitals, upsetting looking genitals on TV, we could go to Africa, we could go to, global south parts of Asia, we could go to South America, and we could perform these surgeries for free, the way that people do for cleft palate. And uh, and so I thought, when Flora, and it was Flora, by the way, who secured this interview, this Herculean task that she accomplished to get Richard Carter to sit on camera and to spend all that time. Um, yeah, I'll always be thankful to you, Flora. But I just wanted to show someone different, show people something different, and that if it was because I didn't like when we showed this film in Austin and we showed it in Copenhagen, people were like, "What the hell?" Like you could tell that they wanted that outlet. They wanted that visceral reaction in me at him because
Mm,
the film builds up to something so powerful.
mm,
And then you've got me really focused and concentrating on being present, being with this man, setting the horror of his disaffection, right? He's completely disconnected
yeah.
from this experience of what he did multiple times. It wasn't just one surgery. We're talking about multiple surgeries over the first 3 years of my life. So to show people something different, and if the story of the payoff did not pay off, it didn't pay off. But I just thought it's important, and I'll keep repeating myself because I haven't gotten all these answers down pat yet. But um, I just wanted to show people something different. Knowing, and I'll just say these people do not see themselves as mutilators of children. They
Mm-mm.
see themselves as angels of mercy. That's how
Yeah.
they see themselves. And so yelling at them or screaming at them or being like, you
Yeah.
fucking, awful person. It's not, it's something I would have done 20 years ago. It's not something I would do today. Yeah.
I think it was probably really strategic of you and really hard to do, as you've alluded to, but really strategic because I have to assume, as you're saying, if you had come in strong, he very likely would have been very defensive and not said nearly as much as he said. So you were, to me, it seemed like you were really intentionally creating sadly, you were focused on creating a safe space for him right? The irony of that.
Right.
But kudos to you because that takes a lot to do after what you've been through and after what many of us have been through.
Thank you, Kim. But I mean, the thing that keeps me up sometimes at night is that everything that I said, I absolutely believe.
Hmm.
But then there's still a part of me that was like, he was right there.
Hmm.
Why didn't you? You know? But I knew ultimately, I could eventually sleep at night in the future for the rest of my life, knowing that I handled him that way.
Yeah.
Because everyone, the viewers, the filmmakers, I mean, everyone knows how I wouldn't say dying inside, but really, really suffering. Um, and watching this man in retirement who's just going off to play golf. He's not going to give it a second thought. And, he's going to return to his palatial home. And he said, I remember on his way out, he said, "You say hello to your mother for me." And I just thought, what a nightmare. What a nightmare. Uh, oh,
I
what
think what
a,
you did so incredibly in that interview, Jim, that you won't have realized that you did, despite me telling you lots of times since, is that you drew out of him not just your own need for a confrontation with him, for a settlement with him, but you managed to dismantle in a really short space of time in that conversation the entire institution that had set up him to begin with and what he was doing. You know, he was in practice for 6 months. He wasn't a pediatrician. He didn't specialize in this. He'd never performed this surgery before. He'd read it from a textbook that we now know, or we knew at the time, because I'd spoken to him about it, that was written with Dr. Money's work in it. You know, you so deftly drew out these really important big threads to make that universality and that universal shock of the institution that was making this possible, and not just him. So you held him to account, but you also managed to bring out, the institutional crimes that had happened as well. And I think that was really powerful and really important, certainly from someone who is always going to be on the outside of this issue, but obviously most of the audience are as well, is that they could see how you were let down, not just by him, but by this much bigger institution.
Thank you both. Um, so we've alluded in this conversation to the, what, 5 years or so it took to make this film, to get from there to here. And I think, I'm reflecting on, well, that's one of the reasons why we don't see many, many intersex films, or it's because it's such a huge process, right? And such a long process. And then there's the whole issue, right, of getting the film seen once it's made, getting it seen, getting it out there, and getting distribution, as they call it. So I'd love to ask you, Flora, to reflect a little bit on that aspect of storytelling for causes like this, or important stories like Jim's. The film industry and indeed the world has changed a lot since you started making this film from start to finish. Can you talk a little bit about that, and then also what you think the potential for this film is moving forward from an advocacy and awareness raising perspective?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's never ever been easy to make documentary films of this scale. It's particularly difficult now, and in the last 5 years, it's particularly difficult to make films like this, which have merit on their own basis as films, but also tackle an issue that is complex and hard to understand and hard to package very neatly in a nice PR package to hand over to. And our PR teams have done a brilliant job of doing all of that, but it's a really the nuances and the complexities are not easily disseminated. And so the film has to really do that, and Jim has to do that, and these conversations have to do that. It has been shown in the UK. It's been shown in Australia. It's been distributed around the world. It's had an incredible run at world festivals in the US and so on. But there is still so much more to do for this film. We don't make this film and then just sort of switch it off and move on to the next thing. We made it because it's really important for us and for Jim and for this issue, and we want it to be disseminated as widely as possible in America specifically. I mean, this is a worldwide issue, but Jim's story is American. It started in America.
Mhm.
Reimer's Canadian, but Money was kind of working in America. John Hopkins is this big teaching university in America. It's really important to us to kind of try and get it seen there. All I can ask of people is to tell absolutely everybody about it. to write about it, to be curious about it, to, I'm going to share my email address, send me an email with your thoughts, with how it impacted you, with how you think we might be able to share it. And, you know, Jim notwithstanding, this is going to be something that we're going to be kind of talking about and sharing for years to come. This is not a kind of a flash in the pan and it's one and done. This is kind of slow drip activism and slow drip kind of film sharing over the next few years, and we need people's help to do that. So that's kind of the most important part, is just telling people about it and talking about it, sharing it. I noticed somebody in the thread there has asked how they might be able to kind of use it in their own kind of council work. Again, I'll share my email address, send me an email. We can sometimes set up kind of links and screenings at our kind of Rogan's discretion. So yeah, we're all open to making this seen as many places as we can. So I'll share my email address and people can ask. We can keep the conversation going.
Amazing. Thanks, Flora. Yeah, and please do email Flora. I think that's the call to action, is if you care about this issue, if you like this film and you want it to be seen by more people, help us make that case. I'm looking at questions. It's a lot of lovely comments. You just cited one question there about how to bring this into their workplace, how it can be disseminated more to help educate mental health providers. I think there are a lot of opportunities for using this film as an educational tool for a number of different types of providers. And I know the folks on the team that are supporting this film are very open to collaborating on that. So folks can reach out to Flora. She's providing her email. You can also always reach out to me and I can help make that connection. Comments, amazing film. Thank you so much. Jim, your vulnerability made this a phenomenal film. Thank you so much for your bravery, honesty, and openness. I love the film and hope that so many see it and are moved. And hopefully those who are in the medical field can reconsider all that they've learned. I am curious. Here's a question to Jim. I am curious if you are continuing to be involved in activism, and if yes, in what ways, and if no, why not, if you're comfortable sharing.
Um, I mean, I guess as long as this film, like I'll continue to, I can't pretend like this, like speaking on the subject, is not taxing in some way, right? I do try to tell, there are a couple of young activists where I work at this university I work at, and they're like, I just tell them that like there is a cost, every time you speak, even if it's, a room full of 10 people, maybe the cost is just a little bit, but it costs you something every single time. And you should keep that in mind and not pretend like that isn't the case. But I think as long as this film has a life, as long as this film needs to have to be supported, and as long as I can, you know, continue to behave like a, mature, rational adult and be like, what, maybe I can take care of myself and, and, and hopefully maybe call Flora or Kim or Grace and have them do it. Um, I started in activism in 1999, um, by just appearing on this little Intersex 101 panel at the University of Minnesota with a lot of old school activists: Martha Coventry, Angela Moreno, Max Beck, David Vandertai. Um, like these are like first generation activists, and I was a baby. I was 19 or 18, and so it's been a very long time, and I've been involved at some level, at one level or another, for nearly 30 years. So it's been up and down. But the last project that I worked on, the Interface project, that I co-founded with Eden Atwood, uh, I that really took it a lot out of me, and I really needed to step back. So, yeah. So as long as this film has a life and that it needs supporting, I will certainly want to be public and contributing to that. Um, but yeah, I'm
Amazing.
closer to 50 than 40 now, just in case anybody was wondering. Yeah.
This is indeed a form of activism, a really, really, really important form of activism. And also self-care is real. And I know you remind me of that also sometimes, Jim. Um, I just lovely comments, I think, to end on, thank you so much for this beautiful film, and thank you, Jim, for your courage and vulnerability. I was and am deeply moved and believe and hope this piece will help change more hearts and minds. Thank you for all the work you've put into this film. This is another comment. Jim, I'm also blown away by your vulnerability and bravery and the journey that it took you on. Keep being strong and the inspiration that you will be to so many. So I think that's a lovely note to end this discussion on. Jim, yes, I wanted to
Oh,
give you the last word
oh,
anyways.
okay, cool. Yeah, because this is what I always forget what I say when I just do. I'm like, oh, I said that. Okay, but I do want to remember to say this part, okay? That that right, like Kim, you mentioned that there are what a handful of countries, 10, 11 countries that have sort of, you
Mm,
know, ostensibly banned the procedure, but of course the enforcement is uneven at best, right?
less than that, but yes. Mm-hmm.
Right, okay. But in my personal opinion, not speaking for anyone else
Mm-hmm.
or,
Yeah,
or any organization, like I don't think any, policymaker or legislative body or any nation state, for that matter, is coming to save intersex kids. Um, I think what will help spare the bodies of intersex kids, along with the accompanying anguish that families live with, is conversation. I would ask all of you that have seen this film, and thank you again. I would say go have a conversation with your friends and talk about how children born like me with variations of sex anatomy, differences of sex development are real. Their births are common. And that fact needs to be discussed with people who one day want to reproduce with their own bodies. That outcome needs to be embraced and considered as a possibility. Just, yeah. So it's not going to be a governing body that's going to save us. It is going to be just normalizing the fact that these children are real and these children exist and they are entitled to their bodies too.
thank you. Yeah, no, beautifully, beautifully said. And as someone who's been doing policy work on this for many years now, I have to agree with you. I think talking about it, storytelling, raising awareness, perhaps in public health campaigns and in collaboration with the government, things like that are where we need to put our efforts because nothing's going to change until we start changing those really core basic perceptions and dispel some of the myths right around the intersex community. So folks, you can please reach out to Flora, whose email is in the chat. You can also reach out to me, and I can put you right in touch with Ellie and others who are working in distribution if you want to bring this film to your university, for example. I know some of you here have my email. For those that don't, I will also add my email. Uh, there you go. Done. Um, and thank you. Thank you for watching the film. Thank you for joining the conversation. We appreciate you and happy World Health Day.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.